The morning air tasted like ash and broken promises. Clara Whitmore stood motionless at the front of the small church, her hands clutching a bouquet of wildflowers that had already begun to wilt in the heat. The lace of her wedding dress, hand-sewn over 6 months of patient evenings, hung awkwardly around her shoulders, the stitching along one sleeve already coming loose where she'd caught it on the doorframe in her nervous rush to arrive on time. She'd been standing there for 43 minutes. The pews behind her had grown silent. At first there had been whispers, polite murmurs from the women in their Sunday best, reassuring words about how grooms sometimes got cold feet, how Elias Mercer was probably just running late from the hotel. But as the minutes crawled past and the Reverend shifted his weight from foot to foot with increasing discomfort, the whispers had changed. They became sharper, more pointed. Clara felt each one like a needle in her spine. Poor thing. I heard his family never approved. Maybe he finally came to his senses. She kept her eyes fixed on the doorway, willing him to appear, willing this to be nothing more than a terrible misunderstanding. Elias was ambitious, yes, sometimes distant, but he'd proposed to her in front of half the town 3 months ago, had promised her a future filled with everything she'd never had: security, respect, a real home. The door remained empty. Behind her, someone coughed. A child whined about being hungry. Mrs. Patterson from the general store made a tisking sound that seemed to echo off the wooden rafters. The Reverend finally cleared his throat. "Miss Whitmore, perhaps we should—" "Just a few more minutes," Clara whispered. Her voice cracked. "Please." She heard footsteps. Her heart leaped, but it was only Daniel Frost, Elias's business partner, walking up the aisle with an expression that made Clara's stomach drop. "He's gone," Daniel said quietly, not quite meeting her eyes. "Left on the morning train to Denver. He asked me to give you this." He pressed a folded piece of paper into her trembling hand. Clara stared at it. Behind her, the whispers erupted into full conversation. She heard her name repeated a dozen times, heard the scandal spreading like wildfire through the pews, but her hands wouldn't move, couldn't unfold the paper, couldn't make this real. "Read it later," Daniel said, not unkindly. "Maybe somewhere private." Private. As if anything in this town could ever be private again. Clara's vision blurred. The church swam around her, the faces turning to stare, the pitying looks, the barely concealed satisfaction from women who'd always thought Elias Mercer was too good for an orphan girl with no family and no prospects. She turned and ran. The wildflowers scattered across the church floor. Her dress caught on a pew and she heard fabric tear, but she didn't stop. She burst through the door into the blinding Montana sunlight and kept running, her unsuitable wedding shoes sliding in the dust, her veil streaming behind her like a white flag of surrender. She didn't know where she was going, just away. Away from the church, away from the town, away from every face that had watched her stand there like a fool, waiting for a man who'd never intended to show up. The main street blurred past. She heard someone call her name but didn't turn. Her lungs burned. The corset she'd laced so carefully that morning, thinking it would be the last time she'd dress herself, that tonight she'd have a husband to help her, now felt like an iron cage crushing her ribs. The buildings gave way to open prairie. Clara stumbled off the road and into the tall grass, running until her legs gave out, and she collapsed in a heap of white lace and humiliation. For a long moment, she just lay there, gasping for air, staring up at the endless blue sky. Then she pulled out the letter. Her hand shook so badly she could barely unfold it. Elias's handwriting, precise and controlled, like everything about him, filled half a page. "Clara, by the time you read this, I'll be in Denver. I've accepted a position with the Territorial Development Company. The salary is substantial, and the opportunities for advancement are exactly what I've been working toward. I know this will come as a shock, but I need you to understand. This marriage would have limited both of us. You're a good woman, but you have no connections, no family influence, and frankly, no prospects beyond what I could provide. The people I'll be working with in Denver expect a certain caliber of wife, someone who can navigate society, who comes from the right background. This is business, Clara, not personal. I hope you'll understand in time. You'll find someone more suitable to your station. E. Mercer." Clara read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. Not personal. She'd spent 6 months planning a life with him, had given up her job at the schoolhouse because Elias said his wife wouldn't need to work, had sold the few pieces of jewelry her mother left her to help pay for the wedding breakfast, had endured the suspicious looks from his wealthy friends, had smiled through their thinly veiled insults, had convinced herself that love would be enough to bridge the gap between her world and his. Not personal. A sound escaped her throat, something between a laugh and a sob. The sun climbed higher. The prairie grass rustled in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. Clara sat up slowly. Her dress was ruined, covered in dust and grass stains. One sleeve hung completely loose now, the careful stitching destroyed. She pulled off her veil and threw it as hard as she could. It drifted pathetically a few feet away and settled in the dirt like a dying bird. She couldn't go back to town. Everyone would have heard by now. The abandoned bride. The fool who'd waited at the altar while her groom ran off to a better life. By tomorrow, the story would have spread to every ranch, every homestead, every settlement within 50 miles. Clara Whitmore, jilted and humiliated. She had $47 saved. No job. No family. The room she'd been renting above the bakery was paid through the end of the week, but after that, her throat tightened. She'd been so sure, so absolutely certain that marrying Elias would finally give her the security she'd been chasing since her parents died. No more wondering where next month's rent would come from. No more being the charity case that the church ladies pitied. No more being alone. Turned out she'd been alone the whole time, just too stupid to see it. Clara stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to start walking. Not back toward town. She couldn't face that yet. Instead, she headed north, into the rolling hills where the grassland gave way to rocky outcroppings and scattered pine trees. She walked for hours. The sun beat down mercilessly. Her throat grew dry. Blisters formed on her heels where the impractical shoes rubbed, but she kept going, driven by nothing more than the desperate need to put distance between herself and that church, that town, that letter. By late afternoon, she'd left any familiar landmarks behind. The landscape grew rougher, the grass shorter. Rocky bluffs rose on either side of a narrow valley she'd stumbled into. Clara's steps slowed. Her head felt light, disconnected. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday evening? She'd been too nervous about the wedding to manage breakfast, the wedding that never happened. She laughed, and the sound echoed strangely off the rocks. A creek appeared ahead, cutting through the valley floor. Clara stumbled toward it and dropped to her knees, scooping water to her mouth with shaking hands. It was cold and clear and tasted like minerals. She drank until her stomach cramped, then sat back on her heels, water dripping from her chin. That's when she heard the horse. Clara's head snapped up. A rider was approaching from the north, a single figure on a large bay horse, moving at an easy trot along the creek bank. She should have felt afraid. Out here, alone, miles from town with no weapon and no way to defend herself. But she felt nothing, just a distant curiosity about who else would be this far from civilization. The rider drew closer and resolved into a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weathered hat pulled low against the sun. He rode like someone who'd spent more time in a saddle than out of one, his posture relaxed but alert. He spotted Clara and slowed. For a moment, he just looked at her, taking in the destroyed wedding dress, the missing veil, the mud-stained lace. His face was difficult to read beneath the shadow of his hat, but she caught a glimpse of dark eyes, a strong jaw, and the kind of weathered features that came from years of hard weather and harder work. "You lost?" His voice was deep, roughened by dust and disuse. Clara almost laughed again. "That's one way to put it." He dismounted with the easy grace of long practice and approached slowly, like she was a spooked animal that might bolt. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought, maybe 40, with lines carved around his eyes and mouth. A scar ran along his left temple, barely visible beneath the brim of his hat. "There's a town about 8 miles south," he said. "You come from there?" "Yes." "Planning to go back?" "No." He absorbed this with a slight nod, as if runaway brides and destroyed wedding dresses were a regular feature of his afternoon rides. "You got water?" Clara gestured weakly at the creek. "Food?" She shook her head. "Somewhere to sleep tonight?" Another head shake. The man studied her for a long moment. "Sun's going to set in a few hours. Temperature drops fast out here this time of year. You planning to freeze to death in that dress? Or you got some other plan I'm not seeing?" "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "I see." He glanced at the sky, calculating something, then looked back at her. I've got a ranch about 6 miles northwest, Iron Hollow. You're welcome to a meal and a place to sleep if you need it. I can take you back to town tomorrow if you want. Clara studied him warily. I don't know you. No, you don't. He didn't seem offended. Name's Rowan Hale. I run cattle up in the North Valley. Been doing it about 12 years now. You can ask anyone in town about me. They'll tell you I keep to myself, pay my debts, and don't bother anyone who doesn't bother me first. Why would you help me? Something flickered in his eyes. Memory, maybe, or old pain. Let's just say I know what it's like when the world falls apart. Sometimes you need someone to offer you a hand, even if you don't know what to do with it yet. Clara looked down at her ruined dress, at her blistered hands, at the creek water still dripping from her fingers. She thought about walking back to town tomorrow, facing all those pitying looks, finding a new job, a new room, rebuilding a life from nothing while everyone whispered about the bride Elias Mercer left behind. She thought about the letter in her pocket, not personal. All right, she said quietly. Thank you. Rowan nodded and walked back to his horse. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. Real water's better than creek water. Drink slow. Clara did as instructed. The water was warm but clean. Can you ride? Rowan asked. A little. Good enough. He swung back into the saddle and offered his hand. Come on then, we're burning daylight. Clara hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was calloused and strong. He pulled her up behind him with easy strength, and she had to grab onto his coat to keep from sliding off. Hold on, he said, and nudged the horse into a trot. They rode north into the hills. Clara clung to Rowan's coat as the landscape changed around them, the grassland giving way to rocky slopes dotted with pine and juniper. The sun dropped toward the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. You got family? Rowan asked after a while. No, they died when I was 16. The groom? Clara's hands tightened on his coat. Gone. Left on the morning train. Before or after the wedding? Before? Rowan made a sound that might have been disgust. Brave man. Despite everything, Clara felt the corner of her mouth twitch. That's one word for it. They rode in silence for another mile. The valley Rowan had mentioned opened up ahead, a wide expanse of grassland hemmed in by rocky bluffs on 3 sides. A creek ran through the center, the same one Clara had found earlier but wider here, and in the middle of it all stood a ranch house. It was bigger than Clara expected. 2 stories built from timber and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Outbuildings scattered around it, a barn, a bunkhouse, what looked like a smokehouse and a workshop. Fences divided the land into sections, and in the distance she could see cattle grazing. Iron Hollow, Rowan said simply. As they approached, men emerged from the bunkhouse. Ranch hands, Clara guessed. 4 of them, all stopping to stare as Rowan rode up with a woman in a wedding dress clinging to his back. Boss? One of them said uncertainly. He was young, maybe 20, with red hair and a sunburned face. Everything all right? Fine, Marcus. Rowan dismounted and helped Clara down. This is Miss... He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. Whitmore, Clara supplied. Clara Whitmore. Miss Whitmore's staying the night, Rowan continued. Marcus, get some water heating. James, see if we've got anything in the stores that might fit a woman. Sarah keeps some things in the spare room, doesn't she? An older man with gray streaking his beard, James apparently, nodded slowly. Yes, sir. I'll check. The ranch hands exchanged glances but didn't ask questions. They scattered to their tasks, leaving Clara standing in the yard feeling exposed and absurd in her destroyed dress. Rowan gestured toward the house. Come on, you can clean up and we'll find you something to eat. Clara followed him up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was sparse but clean. Wooden floors, simple furniture, everything practical and well-maintained. It had the feel of a place inhabited by someone who had no interest in decoration or comfort, only function. Spare rooms upstairs, Rowan said, leading her up a narrow staircase. First door on the left. There should be a wash basin. James will bring up some hot water. He opened the door to reveal a small bedroom. A bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a window overlooking the valley. Clara stepped inside and turned to face him. Mr. Hale. Rowan. Rowan, she corrected. I appreciate this, truly, but I should be clear, I don't have much money. I can't pay you for this. Didn't ask you to. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. Rowan leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Nothing you're worried about, he said finally. Get cleaned up. Come down when you're ready. We'll talk over dinner. He left, closing the door behind him. Clara stood alone in the strange room, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairs. Slowly, she reached up and began unfastening the buttons of her ruined wedding dress. An hour later, Clara descended the stairs wearing a simple cotton dress that was too big in the shoulders and too short in the hem. James had brought it up along with hot water and a towel, not meeting her eyes as he set everything down and left quickly. She'd scrubbed the dust and tears from her face, pinned her hair back as best she could without proper supplies. The face in the small mirror looked pale and hollow-eyed, but at least she no longer looked like a ghost in a wedding dress. Voices drifted from somewhere toward the back of the house. Clara followed them to a large kitchen where Rowan stood at a stove, stirring something in a cast-iron pot. The young ranch hand, Marcus, was setting plates on a long wooden table. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus said, straightening quickly. Ma'am, dinner's almost ready." "Just Clara is fine." Rowan glanced over his shoulder. "You look better." "I look ridiculous," Clara said, gesturing at the ill-fitting dress. "But it's an improvement." "Sit," Rowan said, nodding toward the table. "Marcus, go tell the others dinner's ready." Marcus hurried out. Clara sat, feeling awkward and out of place. The kitchen was clearly designed for feeding a crew. The table could easily seat 12. Everything was oversized, practical, built for hard use. Rowan ladled stew into bowls and set one in front of her. Beef and vegetables, nothing fancy. It smelled incredible. Clara's stomach clenched with sudden, overwhelming hunger. She hadn't realized how empty she was until the food appeared in front of her. The ranch hands filed in. Marcus, James, and two others Rowan introduced as Thomas and Samuel. They nodded politely at Clara, but didn't ask questions, settling into their seats with the ease of routine. For several minutes, everyone ate in silence. Clara forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour the food. The stew was simple but good. Rich beef, potatoes, carrots, seasoned with nothing but salt and pepper. "So," Rowan said finally, setting down his spoon, "you planning to go back to town tomorrow?" All eyes turned to Clara. She swallowed her mouthful carefully. "I don't know." "What would you do if you went back?" "Find work, I suppose. I was teaching at the schoolhouse before—" She stopped, before Elias convinced her to quit. "I could probably get my position back." "And then what?" Clara looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what's the plan? Teach school, rent a room somewhere, spend the rest of your life being the woman who got left at the altar?" Rowan's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "Small towns don't forget things like that. Every time you walk down the street, someone will remember. Every man who might have courted you will wonder if there's something wrong with you that made him leave." Clara's throat tightened. "You're not telling me anything I haven't already thought about." "No, I suppose I'm not." Rowan pushed his bowl aside. "Here's the situation. I run 1,000 acres of some of the best cattle land in Montana. I've got 100 head of cattle that need tending year-round. I've got 4 good men who work hard but who need managing, and I've got a ranch house that's been empty of anything resembling a real home for nearly a decade." He paused, letting that sink in. "What I don't have," he continued, "is time to manage the household side of things. The accounts, the supplies, the planning, the 1,000 small things that keep a ranch running beyond just cattle and fences. I've been doing it myself, but it's inefficient. I need help." Clara stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership." The word hung in the air. The ranch hands had gone very still. "What kind of partnership?" Clara asked carefully. Rowan met her eyes. "The kind where you become my wife." Someone dropped a fork. The clatter seemed impossibly loud. "You're crazy," Clara said flatly. "Maybe." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "Here's what I'm proposing. We get married. On paper, legal and binding. You take over running the household. You manage the accounts, the supplies, the planning. You help me make this place into something that can last. In return, you get security, a home, a position that no one in this territory would dare question. You don't even know me. I know you were willing to walk into the wilderness alone rather than face town gossip. I know you've got more spine than sense, and I know you're smart enough to understand what I'm offering. Clara shook her head slowly. Why would you do this? For the first time, something shifted in Rowan's expression. Pain, maybe, or memory. Because I tried doing this alone after I lost my family, he said quietly. And I'm tired. I'm tired of eating meals by myself, tired of coming home to an empty house, tired of wondering if any of this matters when there's no one to build it for. He straightened. I'm not offering you romance, Clara. I'm not promising love or happiness or any of the things that Bastard probably promised you. What I'm offering is work, partnership, and a life that means something. A marriage of convenience. A marriage of survival, Rowan corrected. Out here, that's worth more. Clara looked around the table. The ranch hands were carefully not looking at either of them. Marcus was studying his stew like it held the secrets of the universe. James's face was carefully neutral. What do they think about this? Clara asked, gesturing at the men. Doesn't matter what they think, Rowan said. It's not their decision. Actually, sir, James said slowly, if I might, no. It's just that, James. Rowan's voice carried a note of warning. The older man sighed but fell silent. Claire stood up abruptly. I need some air. She walked out onto the porch and stood gripping the railing, her heart racing. The sun had fully set now, and stars were emerging across the vast Montana sky. The valley spread out before her, dark and endless. A marriage of survival. It was insane, reckless, the kind of decision desperate people made when they had no other options. The door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Rowan. You think I'm being cruel, he said. I think you're being practical to the point of heartlessness. Maybe. He came to stand beside her, looking out at the valley. I lost my wife and daughter to scarlet fever 9 years ago. Buried them both on a hill about 2 miles from here. For a long time after that, I thought about following them. Easier than staying here and remembering everything I'd lost. Clara glanced at him. His profile was stone in the starlight. But I didn't, Rowan continued. I stayed. I built this ranch into something that could last. And now I'm 42 years old, and I've realized that building something that lasts doesn't mean anything if there's no one to pass it to. No one to share it with, even if that sharing is just practical partnership. You could find someone who actually loves you. Could I? He turns to face her. I'm not young. I'm not charming. I've spent 9 years being the man who keeps to himself and doesn't bother with town socials or courting dances. The kind of woman who'd want to marry me for love isn't the kind who exists outside of storybooks. That's a sad way to see the world. It's an honest way. He studied her. And you know what? I think you understand honesty right now more than most people. That letter your groom left you, that was honest, wasn't it? Cruel but honest. He told you exactly what you were worth to him. Clara's hands tightened on the railing. You don't know anything about that. I know that if you go back to town tomorrow, you'll spend the rest of your life proving you're worth more than what he said in that letter. You'll work yourself to exhaustion, trying to earn back respect you should never have had to lose. And maybe you'll succeed. Maybe you'll find another man eventually, someone who can look past the scandal. Or maybe you'll grow old alone, teaching other people's children and wondering what your life might have been. And your offer is better? My offer is different, Rowan said. It's not pretty. It's not romantic. But it's real. You'd have work that matters, a home that's yours. And eventually, if we do this right, maybe something that looks like a real partnership. Not love. I can't promise that. But respect, trust, the kind of relationship that's built on honest dealing instead of pretty lies. Clara turned to face him fully. You're asking me to marry a complete stranger. Yes. To live in the middle of nowhere with 4 men I've never met. Yes. To give up any chance of finding actual love. Rowan hesitated. I'm asking you to give up the fantasy of it, but if love happens, he shrugged. I won't stop it. I just won't promise it. This is insane. Probably. I'd be an idiot to agree. Maybe. Rowan stepped back toward the door. Think about it tonight. I'll take you back to town in the morning if that's what you want. No pressure, no obligation. But if you decide to stay, he paused. We'll ride into town the day after tomorrow and make it legal. He went inside, leaving Clara alone with the stars and the impossible choice. She stood there for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, wind rustling through grass. Somewhere, An owl called. Clara pulled Elias's letter from her pocket and read it one more time in the starlight. Not personal. Then she tore it into small pieces and let them scatter on the wind. When she went back inside, Rowan was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes in a large basin. He looked up as she entered, but didn't speak. "I have questions," Clara said. "All right. Separate rooms?" "Yes. The master bedroom is mine. You'd have the spare room you're in now, at least until you wanted something different. I'd want to keep teaching if there's a school nearby." Rowan considered this. "There's a school about 8 miles south. Part-time teacher, 3 days a week. If you wanted it, I wouldn't object. And the ranch hands, they'd have to respect me. Treat me like an actual partner, not like some woman you brought home out of pity. They will, or they'll find work elsewhere." Clara nodded slowly. "What happens if this doesn't work? If we try this and discover we can't stand each other? Then we're stuck," Rowan said bluntly. "I won't lie about that. Divorce is difficult and expensive and would ruin both our reputations. This is a permanent decision, Clara. That's why I'm giving you time to think." "But you've already decided." "I decided the moment I saw you sitting by that creek." He dried his hands on a towel. "I saw someone who'd had the world fall apart and who hadn't given up. Who'd walked into the wilderness instead of crawling back to people who'd hurt them. That's the kind of strength I need here." Clara met his eyes. "You barely know me. What if you're wrong?" "Then I'll deal with it." Rowan hung up the towel. "But I don't think I am." The certainty in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it was just steady, like bedrock. Clara took a breath. "I need the night to think." "Of course." She started toward the stairs, then stopped. "Rowan?" "Yes?" "Thank you for offering me a choice instead of pity." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "Get some sleep, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be a long day either way." Clara climbed the stairs to the spare room and closed the door. She sat on the bed, still wearing the too large borrowed dress, and stared out the window at the dark valley. A marriage of survival. No promises of love, no fairy tale ending, just work and partnership and the slim hope that maybe, eventually, that would be enough. It was the most reckless thing she'd ever considered. And yet, sitting alone in that borrowed room, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, exactly, but possibility. The kind of possibility that came from burning bridges and stepping into unknown territory with nothing but stubborn determination and someone willing to meet her there. She didn't sleep much that night. But when dawn broke over Iron Hollow Ranch, painting the valley in shades of gold and rose, Clara Whitmore made her decision. She would stay. And whatever came next, whatever hardships, whatever struggles, whatever unexpected turns, she would face them with her eyes open and her spine straight. No more pretty lies, just the hard, honest truth of survival. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Clara found Rowan in the barn just after sunrise, mucking out stalls with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times before. He looked up when her shadow fell across the doorway, his expression revealing nothing. "I'll stay," she said simply. Rowan drove the pitchfork into the hay and straightened. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." He nodded once, as if that made perfect sense. "We'll leave for town after breakfast. Should be back by evening." "That fast?" No point dragging it out. He picked up the pitchfork again. "Marcus will have food ready in 20 minutes. You might want to change into something better for riding. Check the trunk in your room. Sarah left some things that should fit better than what you're wearing." Clara glanced down at the borrowed dress, still hanging loose on her frame. "Who's Sarah?" "James's daughter. She stayed here for a few months last year when her husband was working a silver claim up north. Left some clothes behind when she moved to Helena." Rowan returned to his work. "She's about your size." Back in her room, Clara found the trunk beneath the window. Inside lay several practical dresses, a riding skirt, 2 blouses, and a coat that had seen better days but was still serviceable. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She chose the riding skirt and a plain cotton blouse, both of which fit reasonably well. Looking at herself in the small mirror, Clara barely recognized the woman staring back. Yesterday morning, she'd been a bride. Now she was, what, a rancher's wife-to-be? A woman making the second most reckless decision of her life? The first had been saying yes to Elias Mercer. At least this time, she knew exactly what kind of bargain she was making. Breakfast was a quiet affair. The ranch hands ate quickly, clearly unsure how to behave around her now that the boss had announced his intentions. Only James met her eyes directly, and even he looked worried. "Miss Whitmore," he said as she finished her coffee, "might I have a word? Private-like?" Clara glanced at Rowan, who shrugged. "Go ahead. I need to saddle the horses anyway." In the yard, James pulled off his hat and turned it in his weathered hands. "Look, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but I've known Rowan Hale for 12 years. He's a good man, fair, honest. But he's also—" James paused, searching for words. "He's also someone who's forgotten how to be anything but alone. You understand what I'm saying?" "Not really. What I mean is, don't expect warmth from him. Don't expect him to change or soften or become some different person just because there's a woman in the house again." James's expression was earnest. He loved his first wife something fierce. When she died, it broke something in him. What you're getting isn't the man he was. It's what's left after. Clara absorbed this. "Did he ask you to tell me this?" "Hell no, he'd probably fire me if he knew." James managed a slight smile. "But my Sarah's about your age, and if she was about to marry a stranger for practical reasons, I'd want someone to give her the straight truth first. I appreciate that. Do you?" James studied her. "Because here's the other truth. This ranch will chew you up if you let it. The work's hard. The winters are brutal. And the men around here aren't used to taking orders from a woman, no matter what the boss says. You're going to have to fight for every inch of respect." "I've been fighting my whole life," Clara said quietly. "At least here I'll be fighting for something that's mine." James considered this, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just remember, we're here if you need help. Won't always seem like it, but we are." Rowan appeared leading 2 horses, both already saddled. He handed Clara the reins to a gray mare with kind eyes. "Her name's Ash. She's steady. Won't spook easy." The ride to town took nearly 2 hours. They followed a rough trail that wound through the hills, sometimes wide enough for them to ride side by side, sometimes narrowing to single file. Rowan didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. He pointed out landmarks occasionally, a creek that flooded in spring, a stand of pines where they'd sheltered during a blizzard 3 years back, a rocky outcropping where eagles nested. Clara found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made Montana feel like the edge of something vast and untamed. For the first time since yesterday morning, her chest didn't feel quite so tight. "You ride well," Rowan observed. "My father kept horses before he died. He taught me young." "What did he do? Carpentry mostly? Some farming?" Clara adjusted her grip on the reins. "We had a small place outside of St. Louis. Nothing like this, just a few acres. But it was home." "How'd you end up in Montana?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "After my parents died, I had nothing keeping me there. A teacher I knew had moved out here and wrote saying they needed help at the school. I figured a fresh start might be good." "Was it?" "For a while." Clara watched the trail ahead. "Then I met Elias and convinced myself that security mattered more than independence. And now? Now I'm riding toward town to marry a stranger, so clearly I'm excellent at making decisions." Rowan's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. "At least you're honest about it." They crested a hill and the town appeared below, a scattered collection of buildings huddled around a main street, looking small and temporary against the massive landscape. Clara's stomach clenched. "We don't have to go to the church," Rowan said, as if reading her thoughts. "Judge Morrison can do it at his office. Quieter." "Thank you." They rode down the hill in silence. The judge's office was above the land registry, reached by an external wooden staircase that creaked under their boots. Inside, Judge Morrison looked up from a desk covered in papers, his eyebrows rising at the sight of them. "Rowan Hale. Didn't expect to see you in town 2 days running." His gaze shifted to Clara, and recognition flickered across his face. "And Miss Whitmore. I heard about, that is, I'm sorry for your trouble yesterday." "Don't be," Clara said evenly. "It worked out for the best." The judge's eyebrows climbed higher. He looked between them, clearly piecing things together. "I see. And you're here because, we need a marriage license," Rowan said. "Can you do the ceremony today?" "Today? Rowan, Morrison stopped, seeming to reconsider. You're both sure about this? Yes, they said in unison. Morrison studied them for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out a leather-bound book. All right then. I'll need some information first. The paperwork took 20 minutes. Names, ages, places of birth. Morrison asked the questions mechanically, filling in the marriage register with careful script. Clara watched her name appear on the page next to Rowan's and felt oddly detached, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold. I'll need witnesses, Morrison said finally. Let me fetch my clerk, and I'll stand for them. They all turned. A woman stood in the doorway, elegant in a deep blue dress that probably cost more than Clara had earned in 6 months of teaching. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of bearing that spoke of old money and social authority. Mrs. Ashford, Morrison said, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't hear you come up. Obviously. She crossed to Clara and extended a gloved hand. Catherine Ashford, I own the largest ranch east of here, and you're the girl who got jilted yesterday. Clara shook her hand, refusing to flinch. That's one way to describe it. It's the accurate way. Catherine's eyes were sharp, but not unkind. I also heard Elias Mercer is a spineless social climber who wouldn't know genuine worth if it bit him. So in my estimation, you dodged a bullet. Despite herself, Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. That's generous of you to say. It's honest. Catherine turned to Rowan. You're really doing this? Marrying a woman you met yesterday? Yes. Why? That's our business, Catherine. Fair enough. She removed her gloves. I'll stand witness anyway. Someone should make sure you don't completely muck this up. Morrison cleared his throat. If we're ready, then wait. Clara turned it to Rowan. Before we do this, I need to know something. All right. What happens if I fail? If I can't handle the ranch, or I'm terrible at managing things, or... She stopped, gathering her courage. What happens if I'm not what you need? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then we figure it out together. That's what partnership means. Even if I make mistakes? Clara, I've made enough mistakes running this place to fill a barn. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting effort. He met her eyes. Can you give me that? Yes. Then that's enough. Morrison opened his book. Let's begin. The ceremony was nothing like the one Clara had imagined 24 hours ago. No flowers, no music, no crowd of well-wishers. Just Morrison reading the legal requirements in a monotone voice while Catherine Ashford watched with undisguised interest, and the clerk, a nervous young man who'd been summoned from downstairs, shifted his weight from foot to foot. When Morrison reached the vows, Clara heard herself repeat the words in a voice that sounded steadier than she felt. Rowan's responses were quiet but firm. Do you have rings? Morrison asked. Rowan shook his head. No. Then by the authority vested in me by the Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Morrison closed his book. Congratulations. Catherine signed the register as witness, her signature a confident flourish. The clerk signed below hers with a shaking hand. That's it then, Morrison said. You're legally married. Clara looked down at her hands. Still ringless, still the same hands as an hour ago, but somehow everything had changed. Thank you, Judge, Rowan said. He shook Morrison's hand and nodded to Catherine. We should get back. Rowan, wait. Catherine touched his arm. Let me buy you both lunch at the hotel. It's the least I can do for entertainment value alone. We really should. I insist. Catherine's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Besides, people are going to talk regardless. Might as well give them something concrete to discuss. The hotel dining room went silent when they walked in. Every head turned. Clara felt the weight of their stares, saw recognition dawn on face after face. The bride from yesterday, the one Elias Mercer had abandoned, now walking in with Rowan Hale, dressed like a ranch wife, wearing no ring. Catherine led them to a table by the window and sat down with the air of someone who owned the place, which, Clara realized, she probably did. Stop staring, Catherine said loudly to the room at large. You're all being tremendously rude. The conversations resumed, though Clara could still feel eyes on them. A waitress approached, young, blonde, pretty, in a way that made Clara suddenly aware of her borrowed clothes and hastily pinned hair. Mrs. Ashford, Mr. Hale. She didn't acknowledge Clara. "What can I bring you?" "3 steaks, medium rare," Catherine said. "And coffee. The good stuff, not whatever swill you're serving the miners." The waitress nodded and disappeared. "She's one of Elias's cousins," Catherine said conversationally. "The Mercers think they're frontier royalty because they got here early and bought cheap land. Fact is, they're broke and desperate, which is why Elias was so keen on marrying money." She sipped her water. "You know he was courting Margaret Pemberton at the same time he was engaged to you?" Clara's hands tightened in her lap. "No." "Oh, yes. Margaret's father owns the bank. Much better prospects than a schoolteacher with no family." Catherine's expression was matter-of-fact. "Of course, Margaret saw through him immediately and sent him packing. That's when he ran to Denver. The job offer was real, but he'd been angling for it for months." Rowan spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. "Catherine, what's your point?" "My point is that Clara here deserves to know she wasn't the problem. Elias Mercer is a calculating bastard who is never going to marry for anything but advantage." She turned to Clara. "And frankly, you're better off with Rowan. He might be about as romantic as a fence post, but at least he's honest." "I'm sitting right here," Rowan said mildly. "I know. I'm trying to help." Catherine leaned back as the waitress returned with coffee. "So Clara, tell me about yourself. Where are you from originally?" The lunch passed in a blur of questions and careful answers. Catherine was relentless, but not unkind, drawing out details about Clara's background, her teaching, her plans for the ranch. Rowan said little, but Clara noticed he was listening intently. "You'll need proper clothes," Catherine said as they finished eating. "Ranch work destroys fabric faster than you'd believe. I'll have my seamstress send some things out to Iron Hollow. Don't argue, Rowan. Consider it a wedding gift." "That's not necessary," Clara started. "Of course it's not necessary. That's why it's a gift." Catherine stood. "Now, I'm sure you want to get home before dark. But Clara, stop by my ranch sometime. It's the Ashford place, about 15 miles east. Any of the hands can point you there. I'd like to talk more when you're settled." Outside, Rowan helped Clara onto her horse. "Sorry about that." "Why? She was kind." "Catherine's never just kind. She's gathering information." Rowan swung onto his own horse. "But she's also one of the most powerful ranchers in the territory, so having her on our side isn't a bad thing." They rode out of town at a steady pace. Clara didn't look back. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when they finally reached Iron Hollow. The ranch hands were finishing evening chores, and they stopped to watch Rowan and Clara ride in. Marcus approached first, hat in hand. "How'd it go, boss?" "Done," Rowan said simply. He dismounted and helped Clara down. To the assembled men, he said clearly, "This is Clara Hale, my wife. She'll be managing the household and helping with the ranch operations. You'll treat her with the same respect you'd give me. Any questions?" Thomas, one of the quieter hands, raised a tentative hand. "Does she know how to shoot?" "Not yet," Clara said before Rowan could answer. "But I'm willing to learn." Thomas nodded slowly. "Fair enough, ma'am. Just Clara." "Yes, ma'am, I mean Clara, ma'am." Thomas flushed and retreated. Samuel, who hadn't spoken during dinner the previous night, stepped forward. "Welcome to Iron Hollow, Mrs. Hale. If you need anything, you just holler." "Thank you, Samuel." James appeared from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "Congratulations, both of you." He looked at Rowan. "You want I should move your things to the spare room, boss? Give the lady the master bedroom." "No," Rowan said. "Arrangements stay as they are." An awkward silence fell. Clara felt her cheeks warm but kept her expression neutral. "Right," James said finally. "Well, supper's ready whenever you are." That night, after a meal that was equal parts congratulatory and uncomfortable, Clara climbed the stairs to her room, which she supposed was still her room, despite now being married. Rowan had disappeared into his own bedroom without ceremony, and the ranch hands had scattered to the bunkhouse. Clara sat on her bed, still dressed, and tried to process the day. Married. She was married now. To a man she'd known for less than 48 hours, a man currently sleeping alone in a bedroom down the hall. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Rowan opened the door but didn't enter. "Just wanted to make sure you had everything you need." "I'm fine." He nodded. "Tomorrow I'll show you the account books, the supplies inventory, how we run things here. It'll be a lot to take in at once." "I can handle it." "I know." He paused. Clara, this arrangement, it's going to be strange for both of us. If you need space or time or... I knew what I was agreeing to, Clara said. I'm not going to fall apart. Good. He started to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. After he'd gone, Clara changed into a nightgown Sarah had left behind and climbed under the quilt. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the vast sky. Mrs. Clara Hale. It should have felt wrong, should have felt like a lie. Instead, it just felt like possibility. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn to the sound of boots on the stairs. By the time she dressed and made her way to the kitchen, the ranch hands were already at the table and Rowan was cooking eggs. Coffee's ready, Marcus said, nodding toward the pot. Clara poured herself a cup and sat. No one seemed to know quite what to say to her. So, she said finally, what does everyone do around here? I should probably know that if I'm managing things. This broke the ice. Marcus explained his role handling the cattle during the day shifts. Thomas managed the horses and equipment repairs. Samuel handled the fencing and building maintenance. James, as the oldest and most experienced, served as foreman and oversaw everyone else. What about the supplies? Clara asked. Food, tools, everything else? Boss handles that, Marcus said. Rides into town once a month, brings back what we need. And the accounts? Who tracks expenses and income? The men exchanged glances. Boss does that too, James said. Keeps the books in his office. Clara turned to Rowan. Can I see them? After breakfast, Rowan led her to a small room off the main hall that served as his office. It was spartanly furnished, a desk, 2 chairs, shelves lined with ledgers and ranch records. He pulled down a thick book and opened it. Clara leaned over his shoulder, studying the entries. The handwriting was precise, the numbers neat, but the organization was chaos. Expenses mixed with income, no clear categories, no way to track patterns or identify problems. This is a mess, she said without thinking, then caught herself. I mean, it's a mess, Rowan agreed. I know, I'm a rancher, not a bookkeeper. May I reorganize it? That's why you're here. Clara spent the next 3 hours going through the ledgers, making notes, asking questions. Rowan answered patiently, explaining the ranch's operations, how many cattle they ran, what they sold each year, their major expenses, their profit margins. We're doing all right, Clara said finally, sitting back. Not great, but stable. The problem is you're losing money in places you don't need to. These supply runs to town, you're paying premium prices because you're buying everything at once. If we planned better, bought strategically, how much could we save? Clara did some quick calculations. Maybe 15%? Could be more if we're smart about it. Rowan studied her. You're good at this. My father taught me. He had to be careful with money. Clara closed the ledger. I can have this reorganized in a week. Set up a proper system. Do it. Over the following days, Clara threw herself into learning the ranch. She rode out with Marcus to see the cattle, helped Thomas inventory the tools, walked the fence lines with Samuel, watched James direct the men through their daily routines. The work was exhausting. Her hands blistered from unfamiliar tasks. Her legs ached from hours in the saddle. Every night she collapsed into bed, barely able to move. But she also felt something she hadn't felt in years. Useful. A week after the wedding, Clara was in the kitchen making bread when she heard horses approaching. She looked out the window to see 3 riders, strangers, all armed. She found Rowan in the barn. We have visitors. His expression tightened. How many? 3. They're armed. Stay inside. Like hell. Clara followed him into the yard. The riders had stopped near the house. The leader was a heavy-set man with a thick beard and cold eyes. Rowan Hale? That's right. State your business. Name's Garrett. I'm with the Montana Cattlemen's Association. We've had reports of rustling in this area. Lost any stock recently? No. Mind if we look around? Yes, I mind. You got a warrant? Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Don't need a warrant to investigate theft. We're trying to help, Hale. Unless you got something to hide. Clara felt the tension ratchet up. The ranch hands had emerged from various buildings, all watching carefully. You can investigate all you want, Rowan said evenly. On someone else's land. This is private property. That how you want to play it? Garrett's hand drifted toward his gun. That's how it is. Rowan's voice stayed calm, but Clara saw his stance shift, ready for trouble. One of Garrett's companions leaned forward. We heard you got yourself a new wife, Hale. That her? None of your concern. Pretty thing. Must be nice, coming home to that every night. Clara felt rage flash through her. Before Rowan could respond, she stepped forward. I'm standing right here. You want to say something about me. Say it to my face. Garrett laughed. Got some fire in her, I like that. Get off our land, Clara said coldly. Now. Or what? Clara was wondering the same thing when James appeared at her elbow, rifle in hand. Then Marcus, also armed. Thomas and Samuel flanked them. Or we remove you, James said quietly. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett spat in the dust. Fine, we're leaving. But you hear me, Hale. There's big changes coming to this territory. Ranchers are banding together for protection. Those who don't join up might find themselves on the wrong side of things. I'll take my chances. Garrett turned his horse. Your funeral. He looked at Clara. Both of yours. They rode off, kicking up dust. Who were they really? Clara asked once they were out of sight. Trouble, Rowan said. The Cattlemen's Association is real, but Garrett's not with them. He's muscle for hire. Someone's testing us, seeing how we react. Why? Because this is good land, and there's people who want it. Rowan looked at her. You handled that well. Stupid, but well. Stupid? Never challenge armed men when you're unarmed. I wasn't alone. No. Rowan glanced at the ranch hands who were dispersing back to their work. You weren't. That night, Rowan taught Clara to shoot. They set up targets behind the barn, old bottles and tin cans lined up on fence posts. Rowan handed her a revolver, showed her how to hold it, how to aim, how to breathe. Don't anticipate the recoil, he said, standing close behind her. Just squeeze smooth and let it happen. Clara fired. The gun kicked harder than expected, and her shot went wide. Again. She fired 5 more times, missed every shot. You're tensing up, Rowan said. Relax your shoulders. I am relaxed. You're not. His hand settled on her shoulders, applying gentle pressure. Here. Feel the difference? Clara nodded, suddenly very aware of how close he was standing. Now try. She fired again. This time the bottle exploded. Better, Rowan said, stepping back. Keep practicing. For the next hour, Clara fired until her ears rang and her hands ached. By the end, she was hitting more than she missed. Good enough for now, Rowan said, but you need to practice every day. Being accurate once doesn't mean much if you can't do it under pressure. Walking back to the house, Clara said, Those men today, they'll come back, won't they? Probably. And next time they might not leave peacefully. No. Clara stopped walking. Rowan, what exactly are we up against here? He was quiet for a long moment. The truth? I don't entirely know yet, but there's been pressure on independent ranchers for the last year. Small operations getting bought out, sometimes forcibly. Cattle going missing. Accidents that aren't quite accidents. Someone's trying to consolidate land, and they don't care who they have to push aside to do it. And you won't sell. This is my land. I built it from nothing. I'm not giving it up because some hired thugs think they can scare me off. He looked at her. If that's a problem for you, it's not. Clara met his eyes. But I need to know what I'm fighting for. All of it, not just pieces. All right. Rowan headed for the house. Come on, I'll show you. In his office, he pulled out maps and land deeds, spreading them across the desk. This is Iron Hollow, 1,000 acres, all legally owned. The best grazing land in this part of the territory. There's water year-round from the creek, natural shelter in the bluffs. We're positioned between 3 major cattle routes, making it valuable. Very. And making it a target. He pointed to marks on the map. These are the ranches that have sold in the last 18 months, most to something called the Western Territory Development Corporation. Ever heard of them? Clara shook her head. Neither had I, until they started buying up land. They're backed by money from back east, railroad men, politicians, investors, looking to turn the frontier into profit. Rowan's jaw tightened. The problem is, a few of us won't sell. Me, Catherine Ashford, maybe a half dozen others. We're in their way. So they send men like Garrett to intimidate you. Among other things, Rowan rolled up the maps. I'm telling you this because you're my wife now. That means you're a target too. If something happens to me, they'll come after you next. You need to be ready. Clara absorbed this. What about the law? Can't the marshal? The marshal's office is in Helena, 3 days' ride from here. By the time they could respond to anything, it'd be over. Rowan sat heavily in his chair. Out here, we protect ourselves, or we don't get protected. Then we protect ourselves, Clara said firmly. Over the next weeks, a routine developed. Clara rose with the men, cooked breakfast, then spent her mornings reorganizing the ranch operations. She created new systems for inventory, reworked the supply schedules, and even negotiated better prices with merchants in town by pointing out how much business Iron Hollow brought them. Afternoons she spent learning the physical work of ranching, riding fence lines, helping move cattle, practicing with the rifle Rowan had given her. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned. The borrowed dresses had to be let out as her muscles developed. Evenings, she and Rowan would go over the day's work in his office. These sessions became Clara's favorite part of the day, not because of the bookkeeping, but because Rowan slowly opened up. He talked about his plans for the ranch, his concerns about the territory's future, memories of building Iron Hollow from wilderness. He never mentioned his first wife, and Clara never asked. One evening in late October, Clara was updating the ledgers when she noticed a discrepancy. Rowan, these supply costs from 3 months ago, they're almost double what we're paying now. Why? He came to look over her shoulder. Different supplier, the regular one had closed. Closed or was shut down? Rowan was quiet. What are you thinking? I'm thinking someone's been systematically eliminating the independent suppliers, forcing ranchers to buy from more expensive sources. Clara pointed to other entries. Look, everyone's costs jumped around the same time. That's not coincidence. No, it's not. Rowan straightened. Good catch. We should warn the others. If they're all paying inflated prices, most probably don't even notice. They're cowboys, not accountants. He studied the numbers. But you're right. This is another pressure tactic. Clara made a note in the margin. I'll write up a summary. We can share it with Catherine Ashford at least. She'll want to know. You've been thinking about taking her up on that visit. It wasn't quite a question. Clara set down her pen. Would you mind if I did? Why would I mind? Because she's... Clara paused, choosing her words carefully. She's powerful, influential, and she seems to like collecting information about people. That's an accurate assessment. Rowan leaned against the desk. But she's also smart, and she's on our side. For now, at least. Having her as an ally is worth the risk of her knowing our business. You trust her? I trust her to act in her own interest. Right now, that lines up with ours. Clara nodded slowly. I'll ride over next week, then. Take Marcus with you. I don't want you traveling alone. The concern in his voice surprised her. Clara looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not quite attraction, not quite friendship, but some new thing that didn't have a name yet. All right, Clara said softly. I'll take Marcus. The moment stretched, then Rowan cleared his throat and moved back to his chair. It's late. We should both get some rest. Yes. Good night, Rowan. Good night, Clara. In her room, Clara changed into her nightgown and stood at the window, looking out over the dark valley. Somewhere out there, men like Garrett were plotting how to take this land, how to break people like Rowan, like her, like every stubborn rancher who refused to bend. Clara smiled grimly. Let them try. She was done being broken. The ride to the Ashford Ranch took most of the morning. Marcus kept a steady pace beside Clara, his rifle resting across his saddle, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. They'd left Iron Hollow before dawn, and now the sun was climbing toward noon, turning the prairie grass golden. You ever been to the Ashford place? Clara asked. Once, couple years back. Delivered some cattle the boss sold to Mrs. Ashford. Marcus shifted in his saddle. It's big. Makes Iron Hollow look like a homestead. He wasn't exaggerating. When they crested the final hill, Clara pulled her horse to a stop, staring. The Ashford Ranch sprawled across a valley easily 3 times the size of Iron Hollow's. The main house was a 2-story stone structure with a wraparound porch and actual glass windows, not the oiled paper most frontier homes made do with. Outbuildings dotted the property like a small village. In the distance, cattle grazed in numbers Clara couldn't begin to count. Told you, Marcus said. They were met at the gate by 2 ranch hands who looked more like soldiers than cowboys. Both carried rifles and watched Clara and Marcus with professional suspicion until one recognized Marcus. "You're from Iron Hollow," the man said. It wasn't a question. "Mrs. Hale to see Mrs. Ashford," Clara said, keeping her voice level. The guard's eyebrows rose slightly at the title, but he nodded. "Follow the main road to the house. Someone will meet you there." That someone turned out to be Catherine Ashford herself, descending the porch steps in a riding dress that probably cost more than Clara's wedding to Elias would have. She smiled when she saw Clara. "You actually came. I wasn't sure you would." Catherine turned to Marcus. "Your man can water the horses at the trough there. My cook will have lunch ready shortly." "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said, tipping his hat. Inside, the house was even more impressive. Polished wood floors, real furniture, not handmade pieces. Books lining the walls of what Catherine called the library. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "My late husband was a reader," Catherine said, noticing Clara's stare. "I keep meaning to go through them, but—" She shrugged. "Sit. Tell me how married life is treating you." Clara settled into a chair that was probably worth more than everything she owned. "It's different than I expected." "I imagine so. Rowan Hale's not exactly known for his warmth." Catherine poured tea from a silver service. "But he's also not known for making foolish decisions. The fact that he married you tells me he sees something worth investing in." "That's a cold way to phrase it." "It's an honest way, and I suspect you appreciate honesty more than pretty lies right now." Catherine handed Clara a cup. "So, what brings you here? Not just my charming company, I'm guessing." Clara pulled out the papers she'd prepared. Her analysis of the supply price increases, the pattern of ranch sales, everything she'd pieced together from Rowan's records and her own observations. Catherine read through them slowly, her expression growing more serious with each page. When she finished, she set the papers down and was quiet for a long moment. "How long have you been keeping books?" she asked finally. "My whole life, in one way or another." "And Rowan let you see all of this?" "He asked me to reorganize his accounts. This is what I found." Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out over her land. "I've noticed the supply costs, attributed it to normal market fluctuation. But you're right, the timing's too consistent. Someone's orchestrating this." "The Western Territory Development Corporation," Clara said. "Do you know anything about them?" "More than I'd like." Catherine turned back. "They approached me 6 months ago, offered to buy me out at what they claimed was a generous price. When I refused, they offered more. When I refused again, they stopped being polite about it." "What did they do?" "Small things at first. Fences cut, cattle spooked. Nothing I could prove was deliberate." Catherine's jaw tightened. "Then one of my line shacks burned down. My foreman was inside. He survived, barely, but he'll never work again. The marshal called it an accident." Clara felt cold. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Catherine sat back down. "That's why I'm so heavily guarded now. That's why I'm interested in what's happening at Iron Hollow. If they're coming after Rowan, they're still coming after me too. We need to know what we're facing. Rowan thinks they want to consolidate all the independent ranches." "He's right, but it's more than that." Catherine leaned forward. "I've been doing my own investigating. The Western Territory Development Corporation is a front. The real money comes from a railroad company back east. They want to run a line through this territory, but they need to control the land first. Large consolidated holdings are easier to negotiate with, or force, than dozens of independent ranchers. So they're driving out anyone who won't sell." "Exactly, and they're getting less subtle about it." Catherine tapped Clara's papers. "May I keep these? I want to share them with a few other ranchers I trust." "Of course." "Good. Now, let's eat. I want to hear more about how you ended up married to the most stubborn man in Montana." Over lunch, actual roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables that hadn't come from a can, Clara found herself telling Catherine the whole story. The wedding that wasn't, Elias's letter, finding Rowan by the creek, the bargain they'd struck. Catherine listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Clara finished, she said simply, "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly desperate." "Probably both." "Fair enough." Catherine buttered another piece of bread. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Elias Mercer is a worm. Rowan Hale is, well, he's complicated, damaged, but he's solid in ways that matter. The kind of man who'll stand his ground when everything's falling apart. You sound like you know him well. I know of him. We don't socialize. Rowan doesn't socialize with anyone. But I know his reputation. When his wife and daughter died, people expected him to fall apart or sell out or drink himself to death like so many men do. Instead, he just kept going. Built that ranch into something that works through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness. Catherine studied Clara. The question is, can you match that? Because he won't carry you. He'll work alongside you, but he won't carry you. I don't want to be carried. Good. You'll need that attitude. Catherine stood. Come on, let me show you something. She led Clara outside and across the compound to a building Clara had assumed was another barn. Inside, it was set up as a shooting range with targets at various distances and a rack of weapons along one wall. I practice every day, Catherine said, selecting a rifle. After what happened to my foreman, I decided I wouldn't be helpless if they came for me directly. She loaded the rifle with practiced ease, raised it, and fired. The distant target pinged. Can you shoot? Rowan's been teaching me. Show me. Clara took the rifle Catherine offered. It was heavier than the one she'd been practicing with, better balanced. She sighted down the barrel, breathed out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The target jumped. Not a perfect hit, but close to center. Not bad, Catherine said. But you're still hesitating. You need to trust the shot before you take it. For the next hour, Catherine coached Clara through techniques Rowan hadn't covered. How to shoot from different positions. How to reload quickly. How to stay calm when your hands wanted to shake. The men who come for you won't give you time to think, Catherine said. You need this to be instinct. By the time they finished, Clara's shoulder ached from the recoil, and her ears rang despite the cotton wadding Catherine had given her. But she was hitting the targets more consistently. Better, Catherine said, returning the rifles to the rack. Keep practicing, and Clara... She paused at the door. If things get bad at Iron Hollow, you come here. Bring Rowan and his men. I've got defensible positions and enough supplies to withstand a siege. Don't try to stand alone out of pride. I'll remember that, thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're all targets in this. I'm just trying to make sure some of us survive. Marcus was waiting with the horses, looking impatient. We should head back, ma'am. Don't want to be riding after dark. The ride home was quiet. Clara's mind churned over everything Catherine had said, everything she'd learned. The scope of what they were facing felt larger than she'd imagined. Not just local thugs, but organized money from back east. Not just intimidation, but calculated destruction of anyone who stood in the way. They were within 2 miles of Iron Hollow when Marcus suddenly raised his hand, signaling stop. Clara reined in her horse. What is it? Smoke. Marcus pointed toward the valley ahead. Too much smoke. Clara's stomach dropped. They kicked their horses into a gallop. As they crested the final ridge, Clara's worst fears crystallized. The barn was on fire, flames already consuming half the structure. Ranch hands were hauling water from the creek, a futile bucket brigade against the inferno. Cattle milled in panicked confusion in the corrals. Clara and Marcus rode straight into the chaos. She dismounted before her horse fully stopped and ran toward Rowan, who was coordinating the firefighting efforts. What happened? She shouted over the roar of flames. Don't know. Started about an hour ago. Rowan's face was black with soot. We've got most of the animals out, but we're going to lose the building. Anyone hurt? Thomas took a burn on his arm. Not serious. Rowan grabbed another bucket, threw water that vaporized instantly against the heat. We need to focus on keeping it from spreading to the other buildings. Clara joined the bucket line, passing water from hand to hand in a rhythm born of desperation. Her arms burned. Smoke filled her lungs. But she kept moving, kept hauling, kept fighting. It took 3 hours before they finally contained it. The barn was a total loss, just a skeleton of charred timbers and smoking ash. But the fire hadn't spread. The other buildings were safe. The cattle were safe. The men collapsed in exhausted heaps. Clara sat heavily on the ground, her dress ruined, her hands blistered. Rowan stood surveying the damage, his expression unreadable. James approached, carrying something. Boss found this near where the fire started. It was a torch, partially burned but unmistakably a torch. Someone set this, James said quietly. Rowan took it, turning it over in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were hard as stone. Get everyone together, now! 5 minutes later, all the ranch hands stood in a rough circle. Rowan held up the torch. This wasn't an accident. Someone came onto our land and tried to burn us out. His voice was calm, but Clara heard the rage underneath. I want to know if anyone saw anything. Strangers, unusual activity, anything. The men shook their heads. I was riding the north fence, Samuel said. Didn't see nobody. I was in the bunkhouse, Marcus added. First I knew was when I smelled smoke. Thomas spoke up, cradling his bandaged arm. I was in the barn when it started. Heard something that might have been a horse, but I figured it was one of ours. By the time I realized something was wrong, the hay was already burning. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. From now on, we post watches, 24 hours, 2 men at a time, armed. I don't care if it costs us sleep. I care about staying alive. Yes, sir, James said. The others murmured agreement. Marcus, Samuel, take first watch. James, you and Thomas get some rest. You'll relieve them at midnight. Rowan looked at Clara. You, inside, now. Clara followed him into the house. In the kitchen, Rowan poured water from the pitcher and drank half of it in one go. His hands shook slightly. Are you all right? Clara asked. No. He set down the cup. They came onto my land, burned my property, could have killed my men. The cup shattered in his grip. Clara stepped forward carefully. Rowan, you should leave. The words came out flat, emotionless. This is going to get worse. They're not going to stop, and I won't. He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. I won't lose someone else. Not to this. Understanding hit Clara like cold water. You think they'll come after me? Why wouldn't they? You're my wife. That makes you a target. Rowan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real fear in his eyes. Catherine Ashford has guards, resources. You'd be safer there. I'm not leaving. Clara, I said, I'm not leaving. She moved closer. You asked me for partnership, for someone who'd help you build something that lasts. You think I'm going to run at the first real test? This isn't a test. This is people willing to kill. I know. Clara reached out and took his uninjured hand. Small pieces of broken cup were embedded in the other palm, bleeding. Sit down. Let me deal with this. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he sat heavily at the table. Clara found clean cloth and water. She worked the pottery shards out of his palm carefully, washing away blood, wrapping the wounds. Rowan sat motionless, watching her work. Why? He asked finally. Why what? Why stay? You could go to Catherine's, be safe. Wait this out. Clara tied off the bandage. Because this is my home too now. Because those men don't get to decide where I belong. She met his eyes. And because you asked me to stay once before, and it was the best decision I ever made. I'm not going to second guess it now. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Without warning, he pulled her close, his forehead resting against her shoulder. He didn't say anything, just held on, like a drowning man clinging to solid ground. Clara wrapped her arms around him and held him right back. They stayed like that for a long moment, two damaged people finding unexpected strength in each other. When Rowan finally pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. Thank you. For what? For staying? For being stubborn? A ghost of a smile. For not being sensible. Well, we've established I'm terrible at making sensible decisions. Clara stood. Come on. Let's see what we can salvage from the barn before it's completely dark. Over the next few days, they worked to recover from the fire. The barn was a total loss, but they managed to rig temporary shelter for the horses and equipment. The men worked in shifts, half sleeping while half stood watch. Everyone was armed. Everyone was on edge. Clara threw herself into documenting everything. The damage, the costs, the clear evidence of arson. She wrote detailed letters to the territorial marshal's office, though Rowan warned her nothing would come of it. They're 3 days away and understaffed, he said, watching her seal the envelope. By the time anyone responds, it'll be old news. Maybe, but we create a paper trail anyway, evidence, proof that we reported this. You think like a lawyer. I think like someone who's tired of being helpless. The letter went out with the next supply run. Clara didn't expect much, but at least it was something. A week after the fire, she was working in the office when Marcus burst in, out of breath. "Mrs. Hale, there's someone here to see you." Clara's hand instinctively went to the revolver she now kept on the desk. "Who?" "Says his name's Elias Mercer." The world tilted. Clara gripped the desk edge. "What?" "I told him to wait outside. Boss is in the north pasture, but I can send for him." "No." Clara stood, forcing her voice steady. "I'll handle this." She walked outside. Elias stood in the yard, looking out of place in his city clothes. He'd grown a mustache since she'd last seen him, probably thought it made him look distinguished. It just made him look like he was trying too hard. He turned when he heard her approach, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or appreciation. "Clara, you look different." "What do you want, Elias?" He smiled, that familiar charming smile that had once made her heart race. Now it just made her tired. "Can't I visit an old friend?" "We're not friends. Answer the question." The smile faded. "Fine, I came to warn you." "About what?" Elias glanced around the yard, noting the armed ranch hands watching from various positions. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "No, say what you came to say." He sighed. "I heard about your marriage. To Rowan Hale. Clara, do you have any idea what you've gotten yourself into?" "More than I did when I almost married you." That landed. Elias flinched. "I deserve that. Look, I know how things ended between us was difficult, but I'm trying to help you now." "How kind. What exactly are you helping me with?" "The people I'm working for in Denver, they're involved with the Western Territory Development Corporation, the company that's been acquiring ranch land out here." Elias moved closer, lowering his voice. "Clara, they're serious. They have backing from railroad interests, political connections, enough money to crush anyone who stands in their way. And Rowan Hale is standing in their way." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "Get to the point." "The point is they're going to take his ranch, one way or another. The fire last week was just the beginning." Elias actually looked concerned. "If you stay here, you're going to get hurt, or worse. And you care about that because, despite everything, I don't want to see you come to harm." He reached for her hand. Clara stepped back. "Come with me. Back to Denver. I can get you set up somewhere safe, find you decent work." "You're joking." "I'm serious. This marriage can't be legal anyway. You were clearly coerced, made a desperate decision." "I made a choice," Clara interrupted. "The same way I'm making a choice right now to tell you to get off my property." "Your property?" Elias laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Clara, you've been married what, a month? This isn't your property. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." "Why? Because some lonely rancher offered you shelter? That's not love, Clara. That's not even respect. That's just convenience. You would know all about convenient marriages, wouldn't you?" Clara stepped forward, and Elias actually stepped back. "Here's what I know, Elias. You left me at the altar because I wasn't profitable enough. You chose money and status over me, then had the gall to call it not personal. Now you show up here pretending to be concerned, but really you're just trying to clear obstacles for your employers." "That's not shit. Did they send you? The development corporation? Did they think I'd be easier to manipulate than Rowan?" Elias's silence was answer enough. Clara laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You really are pathetic. Tell your employers that Iron Hollow isn't for sale. Not to them, not to anyone. And if they send thugs to burn more buildings, we'll be ready." "You don't understand what you're up against." "Then let me be very clear." Clara's voice dropped, cold and hard. "I've already lost everything once. I stood at an altar in front of the whole town and watched my future disappear because you were too cowardly to face me. I survived that. I rebuilt. And now I'm standing on land that's mine, with people who've earned my loyalty." She stepped closer until they were almost nose to nose. "So you go back to Denver and you tell whoever sent you that Clara Hale doesn't scare easy. And if they want this ranch, they're going to have to pry it from my cold, dead hands." Elias stared at her. "You've changed." "Yes. I got a spine." Clara turned and called out, "Marcus, Mr. Mercer is leaving. Make sure he finds his way off our land." Marcus appeared immediately, rifle casual, but present. "Yes, ma'am. This way, sir." Elias looked like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he just shook his head and followed Marcus toward his horse. Clara stood watching until they disappeared over the ridge. Only then did her hands start shaking. Well handled, she spun. Rowan was leaning against the house, must have been there the whole time. How long were you listening? Long enough. He walked over. He's working with them. Yes, and he knows about the fire. Probably knew it was coming. Clara's voice shook with rage. He came here thinking I'd be the weak link, that he could convince me to leave. And instead you threatened to defend the ranch to the death. Rowan's mouth quirked. That might have been slightly dramatic. I was angry. You were magnificent. He said it simply, like stating a fact. Clara felt heat rise in her face. I'm tired of people thinking I'm weak, thinking I can be pushed around or manipulated, or no one who's met you thinks that anymore. Rowan looked toward where Elias had disappeared. But this confirms what we suspected. They're coordinating with people in Denver, which means they have more resources than we thought. So what do? We get ready. Rowan headed for the house. And we make sure that if they come for us again, we don't just survive. We make them regret it. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the ranch, the night watch changing, cattle settling, wind through the grass. Every sound made her tense, wondering if it was the prelude to another attack. Finally, she gave up and went downstairs. A light showed under Rowan's office door. She knocked softly. It's me. Come in. Rowan sat at his desk, maps spread out before him, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He looked exhausted. Couldn't sleep either? Clara asked. No. He gestured at the maps. Trying to figure out where they'll hit next. If I was trying to force someone off land, what would I target? Clara came to look. The water. If you control the creek, you control the ranch. That's what I'm thinking, but blocking the creek would take engineering, equipment, hard to do quietly. Rowan pointed to another spot. More likely, they hit the line shacks. Drive off the men watching the outlying cattle, scatter the herd. Can we defend that much territory? Not with 5 men. We're spread too thin. Rowan leaned back. That's the real problem. They can attack anywhere, anytime. We can't be everywhere at once. Clara studied the map, an idea forming. What if we don't try to defend everything? What if we consolidate? Explain. Bring the cattle in closer to the main ranch. Pull back from the outer ranges. Yes, we lose some grazing land temporarily, but we create a defensive perimeter we can actually hold. She traced a circle on the map. Here. Everything inside this radius we defend with everything we have. Everything outside we abandon for now. Rowan looked at the map, then at her. That's actually smart. Risky. We'll be crowding the cattle, might lose weight on them, but smart. It's better than spreading ourselves so thin we can't protect anything. You're right. Rowan stood. I'll talk to the men tomorrow. We'll start moving the herd at first light. He paused. Clara, thank you. For today. For standing up to Mercer. For not being scared off. I was scared, she admitted. I just didn't let it stop me. That's called courage. They stood there in the lamplight, 2 people learning to be partners in ways neither had expected. Clara felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. Gratitude, respect, and something else that was starting to feel dangerously like trust. I should let you get back to it, she said finally. Clara, Rowan's voice stopped her at the door. If things get bad, if it comes down to a real fight, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll run. Get to Catherine's, or town, somewhere safe. Don't try to be a hero. Clara looked at him steadily. I'll promise that if you promise the same thing. That's different. This is my ranch. Our ranch, Clara corrected. That's what marriage means, remember? Partnership. She crossed her arms. So either we both agree to run if necessary, or neither of us does. Your choice. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then, despite everything, he smiled. Actually smiled. Something Clara had only seen a handful of times. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man. Fine. We stand together, or run together. Either way, together. Good. Clara headed for the stairs. Get some sleep, Rowan. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. But as she climbed back to her room, Clara knew neither of them would sleep much. The storm was coming. They both felt it. The only question was how hard it would hit and whether they'd still be standing when it passed. In the darkness, Clara touched the revolver on her nightstand and thought about everything she'd told Elias. About defending this place to the death. At the time, it had felt like bravado. Now, lying awake in the house she was learning to call home, Clara realized it was simple truth. She'd found something worth fighting for, and she'd be damned if she was going to lose it without a fight. The work of consolidating the herd began before the sun fully cleared the horizon. Clara stood on the porch, with coffee growing cold in her hands, watching the men ride out in pairs toward the distant grazing lands. The plan was simple. Bring everything in closer, create a defendable perimeter, force their enemies to come to them instead of picking off isolated targets. Simple didn't mean easy. "This is going to take 3 days minimum," Rowan said, coming to stand beside her. He'd been up since before dawn, organizing the effort. "Maybe 4 if the cattle in the North Valley give us trouble." "What can I do?" "Keep the house running. Make sure we've got food ready when the men come in. And—" he hesitated. "Keep watch. I'm leaving Samuel here with you. If you see anything wrong, anything at all, you fire 3 shots. We'll come running." Clara nodded. She'd expected this, understood the logic of it, but part of her wanted to be out there with them, not stuck waiting and watching. As if reading her thoughts, Rowan added, "I need someone here I trust, someone who won't panic if things go wrong." "I won't panic." "I know." He touched her shoulder briefly, then headed for his horse. Clara watched them ride out, Rowan, Marcus, James, and Thomas, until they disappeared into the morning haze. Then she turned to find Samuel standing awkwardly near the barn. "Guess it's just us, ma'am." "Guess so." Clara forced a smile. "You hungry? I was about to make breakfast." They fell into an uneasy routine. Samuel took up position on the porch with his rifle while Clara worked inside, but she kept the windows open and her own revolver close. Every sound made her tense. Every bird taking flight might be a warning. By midday, the first group of cattle appeared on the horizon, maybe 40 head, with Marcus and Thomas driving them toward the near corrals. Clara helped open gates, watched the animals file through, dusty and irritable from the move. "First batch," Marcus said, wiping sweat from his face. "Boss wants us to get some rest, then head back out for another run. There's stew on the stove, and coffee." The men ate quickly, then sprawled on the bunkhouse beds for a few hours of sleep before heading out again. This was how it would go, Clara realized. Round-the-clock work, everyone exhausted, until they'd pulled in every head of cattle from the outer ranges. She was washing dishes when Samuel called out from the porch. "Rider coming, just one." Clara grabbed her revolver and joined him. A single horseman approached at an easy trot, hands visible and empty. As he got closer, Clara recognized him, one of Catherine Ashford's men, the one who'd been at the gate when she'd visited. "Mrs. Hale," the man said, touching his hat brim. "Mrs. Ashford sent me with a message. She heard about your barn. Wanted you to know she's had trouble too, lost 6 head of cattle last night, and her north fence was cut in 3 places. Is she all right?" "Yes, ma'am, but she wanted to warn you they're moving, hitting multiple ranches at once, trying to spread everyone thin." He pulled out a sealed envelope. "She also sent this." Clara took it. "Thank you. Can I offer you something to eat before you head back?" "That's kind, but no. Mrs. Ashford wants me back before dark." After he left, Clara opened the letter. Catherine's handwriting was as elegant as everything else about her. The letter was brief but concerning. 3 other independent ranches had been hit in the past week. One had lost a line shack to fire, another had half their herd scattered across the territory, the third had simply sold out, the owner citing unforeseen circumstances that everyone knew meant threats. Catherine ended with a warning. "They're increasing pressure, building toward something. Watch yourself." Clara folded the letter and went to find Samuel. "When the boss gets back, he needs to see this." Rowan didn't return until well after dark, leading another 50 head of exhausted cattle. He looked ready to drop, but his eyes sharpened when Clara handed him Catherine's letter. He read it twice. 3 ranches hit, all in the same week. What does it mean? It means they're getting bolder, testing to see who'll break first. Rowan handed the letter back. "Did Catherine say which ranch sold?" "The Bennett place, I think." "That's 20 miles north of here. Good land, but Bennett was already struggling." Rowan rubbed his face. Once they have that property, they'll have a straight line from the railroad survey to the territorial road, which puts more pressure on everyone in between, including us, especially us. We're sitting right in the middle of what they want. He looked at the corrals full of restless cattle. How many head do we have in now? Maybe 150. Marcus said there's another 100 still in the North Valley. We'll get them tomorrow. One more big push should do it. Rowan headed for the house, walking like every muscle hurt. I need food and sleep, not necessarily in that order. Clara had stew waiting. She served him a bowl, then sat across the table nursing her own coffee. Rowan ate mechanically, too tired to taste anything. James said the cattle in the North Valley are in rough country, Clara ventured. Said it might be tricky getting them out. It will be. Narrow passes, steep slopes, easy place for an ambush. Rowan set down his spoon. That's why I'm taking everyone tomorrow. Can't leave it for later. If they realize what we're doing, that's where they'll hit us. You're leaving me alone? I'm leaving you with the cattle we've already secured. If anyone comes, you fire the warning shots and get to Catherine's place. Don't try to defend against a real attack. Clara wanted to argue, but she understood the math. They needed every gun for tomorrow's run, and someone had to stay with the cattle they'd already moved. Fine, but I want more ammunition, and another rifle in addition to the revolver. Done. Rowan stood, swaying slightly. Thank you for holding things together here. That's what partners do. He paused at the doorway. Clara, if tomorrow goes wrong, if we don't make it back, don't. I need to say this. If something happens to me, the ranch is yours. I put it in writing with Judge Morrison when we got married. Everything's in your name, too. They can't force you off without going through the courts, which gives you time to sell to Catherine or someone you trust. You won't be left with nothing. Clara's throat tightened. Nothing's going to happen. Probably not, but I needed you to know. He disappeared upstairs before she could respond. Clara sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the house settle, the cattle lowing softly in the corrals. She thought about what Rowan had said, making sure she'd be protected even if he wasn't there. It was the kind of practical planning that defined him, but underneath it was something else. Care. The kind you showed people who mattered. She cleaned up the dishes, checked that all the doors were locked, and went to her own room. But sleep wouldn't come. She kept seeing scenarios play out in her mind. Ambushes in narrow passes, gunfire in the mountains, Rowan not coming back. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hall, then a soft knock on her door. Clara? You awake? She opened the door. Rowan stood there in his undershirt and pants, looking exhausted and uncertain in equal measure. Can't sleep either? She asked. No. He ran a hand through his hair. I keep thinking about tomorrow, all the ways it could go wrong. Me too. They stood there in the dim hallway, two people bound together by circumstances and choices, learning to depend on each other in ways that were starting to feel necessary. Do you want to come in? Clara asked. Just to talk. I know. Rowan entered carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something. Clara lit a lamp and they sat in the two chairs by the window, the same window where she'd watched stars on her first night here. Tell me about your daughter, Clara said quietly. If you want to. Rowan was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Emma. She was 6 when she died. Had her mother's eyes and a laugh that could fill this whole valley. His voice was steady, but quiet. She was afraid of thunder, used to crawl into bed between me and Sarah whenever it stormed. What was Sarah like? Practical. Smart. She could outshoot most men and wasn't afraid to prove it. A ghost of a smile. You remind me of her sometimes, not in looks, but in stubbornness, that refusal to back down. Is that why you asked me to stay? Partly, but also because you were sitting by that creek looking like the world had ended, and you still had enough fight in you to be angry about it. That kind of strength doesn't break easy. He looked at her. I needed that. Still need it. Clara reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. You have it. For as long as you want it. Rowan's fingers tightened around hers. They sat like that until the sky started lightening outside, not talking, just being present with each other. Finally, Rowan stood. I should get ready. We're leaving at first light. Be careful tomorrow. Always am. He paused at the door. Clara, thank you for listening. After he left, Clara dressed quickly and went down to start breakfast. The men appeared one by one, all of them quiet and tense. They knew today was dangerous. Rowan laid out the plan while they ate. We go in as a group, sweep the North Valley, and drive everything out together. No splitting up, no heroics. We get the cattle, and we get out. What if we run into trouble? Marcus asked. Then we fight our way out. But we don't go looking for it. Rowan looked around the table. Everyone clear? Nods all around. Clara walked them out to their horses. She'd given each man extra ammunition, made sure they had water and some food. She tried not to think about how this felt like sending soldiers off to war. Rowan was last to mount. He looked down at her and something unspoken passed between them. Come back, Clara said simply. Plan to. He turned his horse toward the mountains. Let's move out. Clara watched them disappear into the dawn, then turned to face the empty ranch. Just her and 150 head of cattle and a loaded rifle. She spent the morning maintaining the appearance of normal work, fed the chickens, tended the vegetable garden someone had planted behind the house and mostly neglected, checked the water supply. Every few minutes, she'd stop and scan the horizon. Nothing. By noon, her nerves were stretched tight. She made herself eat something, though the food tasted like sawdust. Checked her guns for the 10th time, waited. The attack came mid-afternoon. Clara was in the house when she heard it. Horses, multiple riders, coming fast from the south. She grabbed her rifle and ran to the window. 6 men, all armed, riding straight for the ranch. Her hands shook as she fired 3 shots into the air. The signal. Then she took up position at the front window, rifle ready. The riders slowed as they approached the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. She recognized the leader, Garrett, the man who'd come weeks ago claiming to represent the Cattlemen's Association. Mrs. Hale, he called out, we need to talk. Talk from where you are, Clara shouted back. Now that's not very neighborly. We just want to discuss a business proposition. I said talk from there. Garrett made a show of sighing. Fine. Have it your way. We represent some interests who'd like to make your husband a very generous offer for this property. More than it's worth, honestly. Not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. Don't need to. The ranch isn't for sale. See? That's the problem. Garrett dismounted slowly. Because one way or another, this land is changing hands. You can take the generous offer and walk away rich. Or you can be stubborn and, well, accidents happen on ranches all the time. Fires, stampedes, people getting trampled. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. That's close enough. Garrett stopped, hands spread. No need for violence, ma'am. We're just having a conversation. No, you're making threats. And now you're leaving. Or what? You'll shoot me? Garrett laughed. You ever even killed a man, Mrs. Hale? Not yet, but I'm willing to learn. Something in her voice must have convinced him. Garrett's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Last chance, take the money and go. Last chance, Clara echoed. Get off my land before I put a bullet in you. They stared at each other across the dusty yard. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst, but she kept the rifle steady. Finally, Garrett smiled. All right. We tried it the civilized way. He turned to his men. Burn the house. Everything happened fast. The rider spurred forward. Clara fired, the shot going wide in her panic. She levered another round, fired again. This time one of the horses screamed and went down, throwing its rider. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Clara ducked as bullets shattered the window above her head. Glass rained down. She scrambled to another window, fired blindly, just trying to keep them back. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze, the crackle of flames. They'd thrown torches onto the roof. Smoke began filtering through the ceiling. Clara knew she had maybe minutes before the house became a death trap. But if she ran outside, they'd shoot her down. She was trapped. Clara moved to the back of the house, kicked open the rear door, and fired at the nearest rider. He went down, clutching his leg. She ran for the barn, bullets kicking up dirt at her heels. Made it inside, slammed the door, and barred it. Her hands shook so badly she could barely reload. Outside, Garrett was shouting orders. Burn that too, burn everything. Clara looked around frantically. The barn was full of hay and dry wood. If they torched it, she'd suffocate from smoke before she burned. Then she heard it. Distant thunder. No, not thunder. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. Through a gap in the barn wall, she saw riders pouring over the ridge. Rowan and the ranch hands coming at a full gallop. They must have heard her warning shots and turned back. Garrett's men saw them too. For a moment they hesitated, caught between the barn and the approaching riders. "Fall back!" Garrett shouted. "Move!" But they'd waited too long. Rowan hit them like an avalanche, his rifle firing before he even fully pulled up his horse. James and Marcus flanked him, cutting off the escape route south. Thomas and Samuel circled wide, boxing the raiders in. It was brutal and fast. 2 of Garrett's men went down in the first volley. A third tried to run and took a bullet in the back. Garrett himself wheeled his horse, firing wildly, but Marcus's shot took him in the shoulder and he toppled from the saddle. Then it was over. Clara stumbled out of the barn, legs shaking. The house was burning, flames consuming the roof, smoke pouring from the windows. But she was alive. Rowan dismounted before his horse stopped moving and ran to her. "Are you hurt?" "No, the house. Forget the house." He gripped her shoulders, looking her over for injuries. "Did they touch you?" "No, I got to the barn, but Rowan, the house can be rebuilt." He pulled her against his chest, holding tight. "You can't." Over his shoulder, Clara saw the men securing the surviving raiders. Garrett was on the ground, bleeding from his shoulder, cursing steadily. 2 of his men were dead. The others were being tied up. "We need to move," James said, approaching. "That smoke's visible for miles. They've got more men nearby." "Load everyone up," Rowan ordered. "We're going to Catherine's place. Now." "What about the cattle? Drive them ahead of us. We'll sort it out once we're somewhere defensible." Rowan kept one arm around Clara. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then let's move." The next hour was chaos. They managed to beat back the flames enough to save part of the house, the kitchen and 1 bedroom mostly intact, the rest gutted. They rounded up what supplies they could salvage, loaded the prisoners onto horses, and started driving the cattle north toward the Ashford Ranch. Clara rode beside Rowan, still shaking with adrenaline. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Garrett's men riding toward her, saw the torches arcing through the air. "You did good," Rowan said quietly. "Held them off until we got there." "I was terrified." "Courage isn't not being afraid, it's being afraid and doing it anyway." He glanced at her. "You shot one of them." "In the leg. I was aiming for his chest." "Still counts." They rode in silence for a while, then Clara asked, "Did you get the cattle from the North Valley?" "Yeah, whole herds ahead of us, about 250 head total." Rowan's jaw tightened. "They knew we'd be gone. That's why they hit when they did. Someone's watching us. Or someone's talking. Either way." He stopped, shaking his head. "We'll figure it out. Right now, we just need to get somewhere safe." Catherine Ashford met them at her gates with 20 armed men. She took one look at the burning smell clinging to their clothes, the tied-up prisoners, the exhausted faces, and said simply, "Inside. All of you." Her ranch hands helped corral the cattle, while Catherine led the humans to the main house. She had hot food waiting, clean water, beds for everyone who needed them. "Tell me everything," she said once they were settled in her dining room. Rowan laid it out. The consolidation plan, the attack on Clara, the fight that followed. Catherine listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer. When he finished, she turned to Garrett, who'd been dumped in a chair with his shoulder roughly bandaged. "Who sent you?" "Go to hell." Catherine nodded to one of her men, who grabbed Garrett's wounded shoulder and squeezed. Garrett screamed. "Who sent you?" she repeated. The Development Corporation," Garrett gasped. "They hired us. Said to clear out the holdout ranchers, whatever it took." "Names." "I don't know names. We get orders through a man in Helena. That's all I know, I swear." Catherine released him. "Lock them in the root cellar. We'll deal with them tomorrow." After the prisoners were removed, Catherine poured whiskey for everyone. "This is war now. They're not even pretending otherwise." "No," Rowan agreed. "The question is what we do about it." "We hit back," Clara said. Everyone turned to look at her. "They burned our house. They tried to kill me. If we just sit here defending, they'll keep coming. We need to go on offense." "And do what?" Marcus asked. "Find the man in Helena. Make him tell us who's really behind this. Get evidence we can take to the territorial authorities." "That's dangerous," James said. More dangerous than waiting for them to burn us out one ranch at a time. Clara looked around the table. We know they're coordinating from Helena. We know they're hiring guns. If we can prove it, if we can connect it to the Development Corporation publicly, they'd have to back off or risk federal investigation, Catherine finished. She looked impressed. That's actually smart. It's also risky as hell, Rowan said. Helena's 3 days' ride. We'd be walking into their territory. Then we don't walk in like targets. Clara leaned forward. We go in quiet. Find this contact. Get what we need. Get out. Catherine swirled her whiskey. I might know someone who can help. A lawyer in Helena who's been asking questions about the Development Corporation. He's tried to get information for other ranchers who've been pressured. Can you trust him? Rowan asked. As much as I trust anyone. Catherine set down her glass. I'll send a wire tomorrow. Set up a meeting, but someone's going to have to go there in person. I'll go, Clara and Rowan said simultaneously. They looked at each other. I should go, Rowan said. You'll be safer here with Catherine. They already tried to kill me, Clara countered. I'm a target either way, and 2 people asking questions looks less suspicious than 1. She's right, Catherine said. A married couple looking into property matters raises fewer flags than a lone rancher demanding answers. Rowan clearly didn't like it, but he couldn't argue the logic. Fine, but we take James with us, 3 riders, all armed. When do we leave? Clara asked. Tomorrow, early. Rowan stood. Tonight we rest. Tomorrow, we end this. Catherine showed them to a guest room, 1 room, 1 bed. The first time since their marriage they'd be sharing sleeping quarters. I can take the floor, Rowan said immediately. Don't be stupid. The bed's big enough. Clara was too tired to be awkward about it. She kicked off her boots and climbed under the covers, not even bothering to change. Rowan hesitated, then did the same, staying carefully on his side. They lay there in the darkness, both wide awake despite their exhaustion. Thank you, Rowan said finally. For today? For holding them off. Thank you for coming back. Always will. He shifted slightly. Clara, about tomorrow. If things go wrong in Helena, they won't. But if they do, I need you to promise me you'll get out. Don't try to save me or be heroic. Just run. Only if you promise the same. That's not together, Clara said firmly. Remember? We stand together or run together. No exceptions. Rowan was quiet. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining. Together. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, 2 damaged people who'd somehow found strength in each other when they needed it most. Tomorrow they'd ride for Helena. Tomorrow they'd risk everything to get the evidence they needed. But tonight, for the first time since their marriage, they slept side by side and found unexpected peace in not being alone. They left Catherine's ranch before dawn, 3 riders heading east toward Helena with enough ammunition to start a small war. James rode point, his eyes constantly scanning. Rowan and Clara followed, close enough to talk but spread out enough that one ambush couldn't take all 3. The first day passed without incident. They pushed hard, covering nearly 40 miles before making camp in a shallow canyon that offered some protection. James took first watch, while Rowan and Clara huddled near a small fire, eating cold beans straight from the can. You scared? Rowan asked quietly. Terrified, Clara admitted, but I'm also angry. They tried to burn me alive in my own house. Our house. She looked at him. Our house, she agreed. The second day brought rain, cold, miserable sheets of it that soaked through their coats and turned the trail into mud. They rode hunched against the weather, miserable but determined. That night they found shelter in an abandoned line shack, all 3 of them crowding into the single room. Helena by noon tomorrow, James said, wringing water from his hat. Assuming the rain doesn't wash out the trail. It won't, Rowan said. He was staring at a map Catherine had given them, studying the streets of Helena. The lawyer's office is here, on Main Street. We go in as a married couple asking about property law. Nothing threatening. And if he won't help? Clara asked. Then we find another way. Rowan folded the map. But Catherine said he's sympathetic. Lost his own family's farm to a development scheme back east. He might actually want to help. The third day dawned clear and cold. They reached Helena just after noon, the territorial capital sprawling across a valley, like a promise of civilization in the wilderness. It was easily 10 times the size of the town where Clara had almost married Elias, with actual brick buildings and paved streets, and the constant noise of commerce. "Stay sharp," Rowan muttered as they rode down Main Street. "We don't know who's watching." They left the horses at a stable and walked to the lawyer's office. The sign read, "Thomas Brennan, attorney at law," in neat gold lettering. Inside, a clerk looked up from his desk. "Help you folks?" "We're here to see Mr. Brennan," Rowan said. "Catherine Ashford sent us." The clerk's expression shifted slightly. Recognition, maybe caution. "Wait here." He disappeared into a back room. Clara and Rowan exchanged glances. James positioned himself near the window, watching the street. The clerk returned with a man in his 50s, thin and sharp-eyed, with ink stains on his fingers. "I'm Thomas Brennan. You're the people Catherine wired about." "Yes, sir," Clara said. "We need to talk about the Western Territory Development Corporation." Brennan's eyes narrowed. He glanced at his clerk. "Take lunch. Don't come back for an hour." Once they were alone, Brennan locked the door and pulled the shades. "How much do you know?" "We know they're buying up ranch land, sometimes forcibly," Rowan said. "We know they're backed by railroad money, and we know they're hiring men to intimidate and attack anyone who won't sell." "Do you have proof of the attacks?" "We have prisoners," Clara said. "Men who admitted they were hired by the Development Corporation. We also have documented evidence of supply price manipulation and coordinated pressure tactics." Brennan's eyebrows rose. "You've been thorough." "We're fighting for our lives," Clara said simply. Thoroughness seemed important. "Sit." Brennan gestured to chairs. "Let me tell you what I know. The Western Territory Development Corporation is a shell company registered in New York. The real owners are hidden behind layers of legal structures, but I've traced it back to 3 sources: Northern Pacific Railroad, a group of investors connected to territorial politicians, and one name that keeps appearing, Elias Mercer. Clara felt like she'd been punched. "What?" "He's listed as a junior partner and territorial representative, based in Denver but making frequent trips to Helena." Brennan pulled out a file. "He's been the front man for several of their acquisition attempts. Always presents himself as a reasonable businessman making fair offers." "That son of a—" Rowan stopped, glancing at Clara. "You all right?" She wasn't. Her hands shook with rage. Elias hadn't just abandoned her. He'd come back to destroy everything she'd built afterward. This whole thing, the pressure on the ranches, the attacks, the burning of her house, Elias was part of it. "Where is he now?" Clara asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "In Helena, staying at the Grand Hotel." Brennan looked concerned. "Mrs. Hale, I can see what you're thinking. Don't. Confronting him directly won't help." "Then what will?" "Evidence, testimony. A case strong enough that the territorial governor can't ignore it." Brennan tapped his file. "I've been collecting information for months, but I need someone willing to go on record. Someone who can testify to the intimidation, the violence, the coordination." "We can do that," Rowan said. "Can you prove the attacks were ordered by the Development Corporation? Direct connection, not just hired guns claiming they worked for them." Clara thought about Garrett, rotting in Catherine's root cellar. "The man who tried to burn our house said he received orders through a contact in Helena. He didn't know names, but he knew the meeting place." "Where?" "He didn't say, but—" Clara paused, an idea forming. "He might tell us if we asked the right way." Brennan looked wary. "What are you proposing?" "We have one of their hired men. If we can get him to reveal who his contact is, we could catch them in the act, get direct proof of the connection." "That's dangerous," James said from his position by the window. "You'd be walking into a meeting between criminals." "Not if we bring the law with us," Clara said. She looked at Brennan. "The territorial marshal. Would he act if we handed him proof?" "Marshal Hendricks is honest but cautious. He won't move without ironclad evidence." Brennan considered. "But if you could get documented proof of conspiracy, witness testimony, maybe even catch them in the act of ordering violence, yes, he'd have to act." "Then that's what we do." Clara stood. "We go back to Catherine's, we make Garrett talk, and we set a trap." "Clara," Rowan started. "Unless you have a better idea?" He didn't. None of them did. They left Brennan's office with a plan forming. The lawyer would contact Marshal Hendricks quietly, prepare him for potential evidence. Meanwhile, Clara, Rowan and James would return to Catherine's ranch and extract the information they needed from Garrett. Walking back to the stable, Clara noticed a familiar figure leaving the Grand Hotel. Elias, dressed in expensive clothes that screamed Eastern money, laughing with two other men in suits. She stopped dead. Rowan followed her gaze and his hand dropped to his gun. "Don't." "I'm not going to shoot him," Clara said, though part of her wanted to. "I just want him to see me." Before Rowan could stop her, she stepped into the street. "Elias." He turned and the color drained from his face. "Clara, what are you? You shouldn't be here." "Why?" "Because your friends tried to burn me alive last week?" She walked toward him, aware of people stopping to watch. "Tell me, were you there when they planned it? Did you help them decide the best way to kill a woman you once claimed to love?" "I don't know what you're talking about," but his eyes shifted, guilty. "The Western Territory Development Corporation. You're part of it. You sent men to destroy our ranch." "Clara, listen. It's just business, nothing personal." The same words from his letter. "If you'd just taken the offer we sent..." "The offer came after the attacks," Clara said coldly. "You tried to terrorize us into selling. When that didn't work, you tried to kill us." One of Elias's companions stepped forward. "Ma'am, I think you're confused. Mr. Mercer is a legitimate businessman. Mr. Mercer is a coward who hires thugs to do his dirty work." Clara didn't raise her voice, but every word cut. "But here's what he didn't count on. I'm still alive. My husband's still alive. And we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what the Development Corporation really is." "You can't prove anything," Elias said, but he looked nervous. "Watch me." Clara turned and walked back to where Rowan and James waited. Behind her, she heard Elias calling her name, but she didn't stop. "That was stupid," Rowan said when she reached them. "Maybe, but now he knows we're here. He'll be scared. Scared people make mistakes. Or they get desperate and do something even worse. Then we'd better move fast." They rode hard back to Catherine's ranch, covering in 2 days what had taken 3 on the way out. Catherine met them with news. Garrett had been talking, trying to bargain for better treatment. "He's scared," Catherine said. "Knows his employers won't protect him. I think he'll deal if you offer him the right trade." They brought Garrett up from the root cellar. He looked haggard, his wounded shoulder poorly healed, but his eyes were sharp with survival instinct. "You want to live?" Rowan asked bluntly. "Obviously." "Then tell us how to find your contact in Helena, the man who gives you orders." Garrett laughed bitterly. "You think he'll just let me walk away if I rat him out?" "You think we'll let you walk away if you don't?" Clara leaned forward. "Here's the situation. You're facing charges for arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy. That's a hanging offense. But if you cooperate, give us what we need to take down the people who hired you. The lawyer we talked to thinks he can get you reduced charges. Prison instead of a noose." "How do I know you're not lying?" "You don't," Clara said simply. "But what choice do you have?" Garrett was quiet for a long time. Finally, "His name's William Cross, former Army captain. Now he does enforcement work for Development Corporation. We meet at a warehouse on the east side of Helena, 3rd Wednesday of every month." "That's tomorrow," James said. "Yeah." Garrett looked at them. "You're really going after them?" "Yes," Clara said. "Then you're either brave or stupid. Cross doesn't work alone. And the people backing him, they've got money, power, connections. You're just ranchers." "We're ranchers who refuse to die quietly," Rowan said. "That's going to have to be enough." They sent word to Brennan, who contacted Marshal Hendricks. The plan was simple. Garrett would go to the meeting as scheduled, wearing a wire and with lawmen positioned outside. They'd catch Cross in the act of ordering violence, get testimony connecting him to the Development Corporation, and use that to force a full investigation. Simple didn't mean safe. The night before they left for Helena again, Clara couldn't sleep. She found Rowan on Catherine's porch, staring out at the dark valley. "Thinking about tomorrow?" she asked. "Thinking about everything." He glanced at her. "About how 6 weeks ago you were a stranger by a creek, and now you're riding into danger with me because we're too stubborn to quit. That's what marriage is, apparently." "Is it?" Rowan turned to face her fully. "Because we've never really talked about what this is, what we are to each other." Clara's heart beat faster. "What do you think we are?" "I think we started as a bargain, 2 people making a practical arrangement." He stepped closer. "But somewhere along the way, It became real, at least for me. Rowan, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just need you to know what we have. It matters to me. You matter to me. He touched her face gently. And if tomorrow goes wrong, I needed to say that. Clara reached up and covered his hand with hers. It matters to me too. You matter to me. She took a breath. I don't know if it's love yet, but it's something real and important and worth fighting for. That's enough, Rowan said quietly. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative and nothing like the passionate romance of storybooks. It was two people learning to trust each other, finding unexpected connection in the ruins of their previous lives. When they pulled apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. Come back tomorrow, she whispered. Both of us. Together. Together, he agreed. The warehouse district of Helena was a maze of wooden buildings and muddy alleys on the city's eastern edge. Marshal Hendricks and 3 deputies positioned themselves in an abandoned freight office across from the meeting place. Clara, Rowan, and James waited with them, armed and tense. Garrett went in alone, a wire hidden under his shirt that would carry his conversation to a listening device Brennan had acquired from a telegraph operator. The technology was new and unreliable, but it was all they had. They watched through grimy windows as Garrett entered the warehouse. Minutes crawled past. Then they heard voices through the wire, crackling and faint but audible. You're late. A man's voice, hard and military precise. Cross. Had trouble getting away. The ranchers are asking questions. Let them ask. By next month, half of them will be gone. We've got approval to move on the Ashford place. Clara's hands clenched. Catherine. When? Garrett asked. 2 weeks. Full assault. She's got too many men for the usual tactics, so we're bringing in professionals. 40 guns minimum. We take the ranch, eliminate resistance, make it look like a range war. Cross's voice was matter-of-fact, discussing murder like a business transaction. The railroad needs that land cleared by spring. And payment? Same as always, $500 per man, bonus if there's casualties on the other side. Marshal Hendricks looked at his deputies. That's enough. Move. Everything happened fast. The lawmen burst from the freight office, guns drawn. Clara and the others followed at a distance, hearts pounding. They hit the warehouse hard. Cross tried to fight, but he was outnumbered and outgunned. Within minutes, he and 2 bodyguards were on the ground, hands bound. Garrett emerged, pale but alive. We good? You're good, Hendricks said. Get him out of here. But Cross was laughing, even with the deputy's knee in his back. You think this changes anything? You got me. So what? The Development Corporation will have lawyers here by morning. I'll be out by afternoon. Maybe, Hendricks said. Or maybe you'll realize that conspiracy to commit murder carries a federal penalty, especially when it involves interstate commerce and railroad land grants. That wiped the smile off Cross's face. See, my friend at the territorial governor's office has been very interested in your employers, Hendricks continued. Now we've got you on record ordering the massacre of American citizens to seize private property. That's not just territorial law, that's federal. They hauled Cross and his men to the Helena jail. Brennan was waiting there with documents, affidavits from Clara and Rowan, Catherine's testimony, evidence of the price manipulation, and coordinated attacks. Together with Cross's recorded confession, it was enough. By morning, warrants had been issued for the senior officers of the Western Territory Development Corporation. Elias Mercer was arrested trying to board a train to Denver. Clara watched through the marshal's office window as they brought him in, wrists in irons. He looked up and saw her standing there, and something in his expression finally broke. Clara, please, you have to understand, it was just business. She walked out to face him. No, Elias, it was murder. It was conspiracy and theft and terror, and you were part of it. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. The money, the opportunity, was worth more than human lives? Clara shook her head. You were right about one thing. This was never personal, because that would require you to actually see other people as real. To me, you were a stepping stone. To these ranchers, we were just obstacles. Everything's a transaction for you. And you're so different now? You married a stranger for security? I married a stranger who offered me honest partnership, Clara said quietly. who stood beside me when people tried to kill us, who built something real instead of stealing it from others. Yes, it started as a transaction, but we turned it into something worth having. You could never understand that." Elias opened his mouth, but Marshall Hendricks cut him off. "That's enough. Get him in a cell." Clara watched them lead him away and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just relief. This chapter was finally closing. Rowan appeared at her elbow. "It's done." "Is it?" "Brennan says the territorial governor is launching a full investigation. Every property the Development Corporation acquired under questionable circumstances will be reviewed. The railroad's backing off. They don't want federal scrutiny." He smiled slightly. "We won, Clara." "We survived," she corrected. "That's not quite the same thing." "No, but it's enough." They left Helena the next day, riding back toward the valley that was home. Catherine met them at her gates with news. The remaining hired guns had scattered when word spread about Cross's arrest. The pressure on the independent ranchers had evaporated overnight. "It's over," Catherine said, embracing Clara. "Really over." "For now," Clara said. "There'll be others. There always are. Let them come. We know how to fight now." They returned to Iron Hollow to find Marcus, Thomas, and Samuel had been busy. The house was partially rebuilt, new timber framing the burnt sections, the roof patched, the kitchen fully restored. "Figured you'd want a home to come back to," Marcus said, grinning. "It ain't perfect, but it's standing." Clara looked at the house, scarred and imperfect but still there, and felt tears threaten. "It's perfect." Over the following weeks, they rebuilt. Not just the house, but the ranch, the routines, the sense of normal life. The cattle thrived on the consolidated grazing land. The accounts Clara had reorganized showed increasing profits. Slowly, Iron Hollow began to feel less like a defensive position and more like an actual home. 3 months after Helena, Catherine rode over with an invitation. "I'm organizing a meeting of all the independent ranchers. Figure if we work together officially, we'll be harder to break apart next time." "Smart," Rowan said. "When?" "Next month. And Clara, I want you to present your financial analysis. Show everyone how the price manipulation worked. We need people who think strategically, not just people who can shoot." The meeting happened in late spring, held in a newly built community hall that represented the ranchers' growing cooperation. Clara stood before 40 hardened frontier men and women and presented her findings with the same confidence she'd once used teaching children their letters. By the end, they'd voted to form a formal association with shared resources, coordinated pricing, and mutual defense agreements. It wouldn't stop every threat, but it would make them harder to pick off one by one. Walking back to their wagon afterward, Rowan took Clara's hand. "You were impressive in there." "I was terrified." "Didn't show." He helped her up onto the seat. "Catherine's right, about needing people who think strategically. You've got a mind for this, Clara. For organizing, planning, seeing patterns." "You saying I should go into politics?" She was joking, but Rowan looked thoughtful. "Maybe not politics, but leadership?" "Yes." He climbed up beside her. "The frontier needs people like you. People who can build instead of just survive." That night, back at Iron Hollow, Clara stood in the doorway of the rebuilt house and looked out over the valley. The scars from the fire were still visible, new wood among old patches in the landscape where nothing would grow for years. But life continued. The ranch functioned. The cattle grazed. The men worked. Rowan came to stand behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. She leaned back against him, comfortable in a way that still surprised her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I almost married a man who saw me as a transaction, who would have spent our whole lives trying to trade me up for something better." She turned in his arms. "And instead I married a man who offered me partnership, who stood with me through actual fire and bullets, who let me be strong instead of needing me to be ornamental." "You were never going to be ornamental," Rowan said, smiling. "You're too stubborn." "Good thing you like stubborn women." "Good thing." He kissed her forehead. "Clara, I know this started as a practical arrangement, but it's become something more for me. Has it for you?" She looked up at him, this man who'd offered her survival when she had nothing, who'd trusted her with his ranch and his safety, and eventually his heart. "Yes, I don't know when exactly it changed, but somewhere between the wedding and the burning barn and Helena, yes, this became real. I love you, Rowan said simply. In case that wasn't clear, Clara's throat tightened. I love you too. Even though you're terrible at expressing emotions, and you work too hard, and you still haven't properly furnished the house. We could work on that last one. We could work on all of them. She kissed him, longer and deeper than before. Together. 6 months after that conversation, Clara stood in the rebuilt master bedroom, their bedroom now, not his or hers, but genuinely shared, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her hand rested on the slight swell of her stomach, still barely visible but undeniably there. A baby. Their baby. She'd told Rowan that morning, and he'd gone very quiet before pulling her into a crushing embrace. She'd felt him shaking and realized he was crying. I thought I'd never have this again, he'd whispered. A family, a future. You have it, Clara had promised. We have it. Now, standing alone in the fading light, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a ruined wedding to a desperate flight into the wilderness. From a marriage of convenience to genuine partnership. From helpless victim to a woman who'd faced down hired guns and corrupt businessmen and her own fear. The woman who'd stood at that altar waiting for Elias Mercer didn't exist anymore. That woman had been looking for someone to save her, to give her life meaning and security. Clara Hale had saved herself. And in doing so, she'd found something better than the fairy tale she'd once imagined. She'd found a love built on honesty instead of pretty lies. A partnership based on mutual respect instead of social convenience. A home they'd defended together and rebuilt together and would raise their child in together. It wasn't perfect. The house still had scars. The ranch still faced challenges. And there would be more threats, more struggles, more moments of fear and uncertainty. But they'd face them together. And that made all the difference. Rowan appeared in his doorway, silhouetted against the evening light. You all right? Clara smiled. Better than all right. Come here. He crossed to her, and she took his hand and placed it on her stomach. Our daughter's going to grow up strong, she said, running through these valleys, learning to ride and shoot and keep accounts. She'll never have to rely on anyone for survival because we'll teach her how to stand on her own. Daughter? Rowan raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure about that. Call it intuition. Clara leaned into him. And maybe a son after that. And we'll build something that lasts, not just a ranch, but a real legacy. Sounds like a plan. Rowan held her close. Think we can do it? Clara looked out the window at the valley spreading into darkness, at the land they'd fought for and nearly died defending, at the future waiting to unfold. We've survived everything else, she said. I think we can handle this. Outside, the Montana sky blazed with stars, infinite and unchanging. The prairie grass whispered in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. Iron Hollow Ranch stood solid and scarred and undeniably alive, a testament to the stubborn strength of two people who'd refused to break, who'd turned a desperate bargain into genuine love, who'd learned that the best things in life weren't given freely, they were fought for, earned through struggle and sacrifice, and the sheer bloody-minded refusal to give up. Clara Hale had been abandoned at the altar and left for dead in the wilderness, but she'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. She'd found strength she never knew she possessed. She'd discovered that real love wasn't about romance and pretty words, but about standing beside someone through fire and fear and fighting for a future together. And as she stood in her husband's arms with their child growing inside her and their hard-won peace spreading around them, Clara understood the truth she'd teach her daughter someday. You don't need someone to save you. You need someone who'll stand with you while you save yourself. Someone who sees your strength and helps you build on it instead of trying to diminish it. Someone who offers partnership instead of ownership, respect instead of control. That was worth more than any fairy tale. That was worth everything.